welcome to episode 17 of Last Turn. I'm Bart. Today I'm joined by Evan. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Bart. Thank you for asking. That is very considerate of you.
Are you ready to play Hearthstone?
I'm definitely ready to play Hearthstone. I'm always ready.
I wish I could say the same.
What's irking you?
Maybe Rogue? I'm not sure. I'm not too... Or perhaps it's Priest. I think I might not be too enthused by the decks that are in the meta right now.
Razakis, I assume, is the one that you're talking about, because that's the most popular Priest deck.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Losing to Big Priest doesn't hurt that bad.
Yeah, well, if you're playing an aggro deck, it can actually be pretty miserable.
Well, yeah, but you just concede as soon as you charge into Obsidian Statue. You pretty much know it's over.
Yeah. It's a bad feeling.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
but it's not drawn out.
I don't like maybe I just don't like long games where all of my cards get answered and then I lose. I think
that's definitely the versus Razakis experience.
Yeah. I'm not sure though. I don't think there's anything inherently, wrong or toxic about the deck. I think it's just my personal preference.
The rogue decks can also be pretty frustrating because they also are sort of doing that. Almost all of their cards are removal.
Yeah, that's
or at least a lot of them are.
That's definitely one of my issues with it, is that playing against it can be a little rough because it's hard to go all in on one minion, but that's okay. I mean, I think we came out of a metagame where that was an okay strategy because we weren't playing against Vilespine Slayers and, Siphon Souls and Tombs, cards like that. But now we're in a meta where we have to do things other than just, stack it up on one guy.
Yeah, there's Cobalt Scalebane is coming out rather than Bitter Tide Hydra, for example.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, he's becoming Hydra's becoming a little less popular. The Dragon is definitely becoming more popular. I'm seeing a lot less Spike Ridge Steed because I'm not seeing as much Paladin.
Yeah, that Paladin has really seemed to lose popularity, though. I'm fairly sure Murlocs is really good right now.
I think so too. I just think it's it's so easy to get 2-for-1 against the most popular decks right now.
Yeah,
and that that makes those sorts of it makes Paladin's strategy of buffing a minion a lot weaker.
Yeah, Rogue is just extremely successful and strong right now.
Yep, it's definitely a good deck.
Razakis Priest and the Rogue deck, I had this thought and I forgot about it. But they both also have this potential to completely high roll you. If you play against Rogue, not only do they have this tempo strategy that's good, but they might just turn one Keleseth Shadow Step Keleseth.
Yep.
And that sucks that can also happen. Or Priest can just have Razakis and Raza and Shadow Reaper Ando in the top 10 cards of their deck, and you're probably not going to win that game either.
Yeah. I think that the chance for free wins is something that makes these decks really strong, and that kind of made a lot of decks we've seen in the past strong. It's something we've talked about, the aggro token druid can just get free wins, and so can these decks.
Yeah.
So why don't you introduce today's primary topic for us?
Okay, so the primary topic today is flex slots. So those would be spots in a deck list that are not they're kind of changeable. They're immutable. It's probably easier to think about the opposite first, inflexible slot. That would be Jade, the 1-mana Jade card, Jade Idol. I totally was blanking on that. Jade Idol in the Jade Druid deck. Can't really use the deck the right way without that card. So there's every really successful deck is going to have actually a good deal of cards that are inflexible. Usually, if a deck is really fast and effective and streamlined, it has very few flex slots because what it's doing happens to be really degenerate, and there happens to be a lot of really good stuff to go together to execute your plan, depending on what your plan is. I think a good example would be Freeze Mage. I think that probably had some of the fewest flex slots historically. Whenever Freeze Mage was a deck, there's not really much you can take out. The deck either works and is pretty strong because there is enough burn, and you have to use all of it,
right?
Or there's not quite enough and it's not a deck. So that deck usually didn't have many cards you could exchange for anything else.
Yeah, I guess you don't need to answer very much. You don't really care about getting a Galaka crawler out because none of their minions are attacking or staying on the board.
Yeah, and it's since it's such an uninteractive strategy, planning pla- considering what the meta is and thinking about what decks you're going to play against is less relevant because what you're playing against matters less
Sure.
because of the nature of your deck. So that's another quality of these decks that tend to have fewer flex slots. And then if you're more of a meta deck or more a control deck that needs to have answers to your opponent's cards, you'll generally that deck list will tend to have more flex slots that are you're going to want to fill with cards that beat your opponents, of course.
Right.
But so that's the point of this discussion, sort of. If you know how to fill the flex slots of your deck list really well, you'll win more. And it's definitely not. It's one of the harder things I would say to do. It's something that you might not like get much like many suggestions watching somebody stream or something like that. Um, and it's going to depend on the meta. So
Right.
picking the right card for your flex slots is going to depend on what decks you're going to be playing against, and then what. Also, you have to figure out what cards beat them.
Sure. Sure.
A good example would be if you expect a lot of pirates, then you might want to fill a flex slot with Galactic Crawler. Um, and one observation, and this is sort of I guess my opinion. I don't know how objective I can be about it, but I think a lot of the decks right now that are really successful, like Tempo Rogue and Rizaka's Priest, have a lot of flex slots relative to decks of the past.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. So, I think that the Reno type decks, singleton decks, tend to have a lot of flex slots, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one, they're singleton, right? So there's no like two of. So even if you have a card you really want to run two of, you generally are unable to do so. Except in rare circumstances, actually. I have seen some decks packing two copies of, say, Galaka Crawler in like tournament. Um,
That does happen, yeah.
but
But
it's rare.
and that's an example of how flexible the deck is.
Right. Yeah, definitely. But also when you impose a restriction like these cards have to be standard legal, they have to be like of in this small set of sets, then I think some of the cards can end up being a lot less powerful. So like in some of the Rosakas builds we see like Gnomish Inventor, you know?
Yeah,
That's like a middle of
the
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 pack.
bar is low.
Oh yeah, it's like a middle of the pack arena pick. And it's just and not because it's it does like basically the same thing it does in arena as it does in constructed. Um, so I think that you can end up with a deck that has a lot of flex slots because its cards will be individually less powerful. There will be, of course, much higher variance on their card strength. Like that's what you meant when you said high roll, because the strongest cards in their deck are like unbelievable. Kazakis, Raza, and Shadow Reaper Anduin, and
Hmm.
specifically Raza plus Anduin is just is enough to win the game on its own. But in order to run such high power level cards, they increase the variance of the power level in their deck, and the variance of how games play out in general, because they have to pack lower power cards, and they can't pack double copies of their most powerful cards.
Yeah, the Razakis list ended up being sort of a lot of really niche or narrow, I guess is a better word,
Mm,
cards like a Galactic Crawler and a Pint-Sized Potion, Shadow Word Horror, um, things that kind of like don't really do anything in a lot of situations, but when they're good, they're really good.
right.
But if you just have if everything is like that, and you get a handful of them, usually you'll be in one situation where one of them's really good, and
Yeah.
that's sort of that's why I think Rizakis is a high skill deck, mostly because of assembling it. You're gonna need to really have a good idea of what you're gonna play against and what's gonna give you more better odds when you get those random cards of having things that actually work and do enough.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that the deck obviously rewards deck building skill, and building singleton decks in standard is really tough. But also it rewards understanding how all of your cards interact with each other and why you might put a card in your deck in the first place.
Hmm.
Um, things like that. Like sometimes I'm sure that you've had this experience. I know I have, where I go and I net deck something like a control deck or a combo deck, and then I try to make my first mulligan decision, and I realize I just have no idea what I'm doing. Um,
Do I need this?
right, like this seems like a good card, or like this is a combo piece. Am I actually keeping this in my opening hand? Like, is that how this deck works? But
Yeah,
with it,
the gate combo mage deck, for example.
yeah,
The quest mage deck. I just threw it together and then started my first game, and I was like, well, how do I need Sorcerer's Apprentice in my opening hand, or do I not? I know I keep the quest. This one I got figured out. Then the other cards I just had no clue.
yeah, it's a tough one. And I think that a deck like Rosakas Priest, you can run into a lot of the same issues because you have to really know what your opponent's playing when you're playing control deck. You have to know what things you expect to use so that you can evaluate whether or not you should be playing a card on the current turn or later. Yeah,
And so the Raza deck, the control deck, sort of unsurprisingly, singleton control deck has a lot of flex slots, but also the I guess the best aggressive deck, Tempo Rogue, also has a lot of flexibility to its build. And if you try and find a list for that deck, you'll find a lot of different things. There's really not that many inflexible slots in the deck.
yeah,
And so there's versions that are like elemental themed and have Tolvir, Stone Shaper, or Stone Warden, I forget, um, along with Tar Elementals and Firefly, and Blaze Caller sometimes.
mm,
In addition to Bone Mares, so like some lists will have 4 7 drops, and most of them only have 2, but that's how much the deck can vary. Um, and then some lists are heavier on the pirates. Some don't worry so much about pirates and have. I saw it was using Zarel and Cairn. I was expecting it to also have N'Zoth. It does not. Um, but
that's cool.
go Corpse Taker. I was running a list successfully for a while with 2 Corpse Taker and the Stormwatcher, of course.
That's
And
silly.
Tar Creeper gave it Taunt and 2 Argent Squire.
Oh, I see. I see. That's interesting. Yeah. So, but I mean, the deck can flex enough to actually allow you to put those cards in without stacking the core package.
Yes, and also the Prince 4. Like, just everything sort of can get in here one way or another.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Valinar's made his way into a lot of my builds just because I haven't really been
Oh, that
too
would be nice.
interested in playing Naga Corsairs, and Spellbreaker seems like redundant in a deck with Vilespine Slayers and SI agents, potentially Blaze Callers and stuff like Bone Mare, and the ability to bounce your Vilespines. So yeah, I felt like I didn't really need a Spellbreaker when I could just kill whatever I needed to die. Um, but yeah, it's definitely the ability of the deck to be that flexible. It could also just run Spellbreakers or Naga Corsairs happily, and use those cards really well. Or you can take those slots and repurpose them for something like you mentioned, an elemental package. I do
Hmm.
I do agree that the deck does have an unusually large amount of flex slots, and I think that's because it's kind of a good stuff deck.
Yes, it very much is. Just like a lot of removal and a strong, efficient minions, 5/5s for 5 that do stuff,
Yeah,
will sort of beat anything.
right.
Because the removal will beat aggro decks, and the fact that you have these really good minions will beat control decks.
hmm Yeah, a card like Cobalt Scalebane is a nightmare for a control deck because it sort of spreads the power out throughout the board, and that can be really
Hmm.
tough. That can be really tough to deal with, when you just have a handful of spot removal, or you have some niche board clears that maybe hit one minion but not the other. So
Hmm.
those cards are inherently good against control. And yeah, the like SI Agent and Vilespine Slayer can just make it impossible to win with a minion based strategy.
And so they just all play Shaku. They all
Yep,
play Van Cleef, 2 Bone Mares. It's like you said, just the good stuff. Just 2 backstabs. Just throw all the patches. Obviously,
sure.
Firefly, definitely one of the best. Like all just the best commons from Angoro. Firefly, Bone Mare.
Yep. Bone
Um.
Mare's from Frozen Throne, right?
Uh. Oh yeah. All the best common from each set.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Like patches.
Yeah. Exactly. Um. And So, sometimes you just have a Shaku early or a Van Cleef early in addition to all the other nonsense you're doing in the actual strategy of your deck. Kalisith.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that. Most of the lists are running Kalisith. And I've even seen actually lists that was just like, screw it, I'm using Galactic Crawlers
Yeah.
and Eviscerates.
I've
And
seen
that
that
was
too.
also really good.
hmm I've totally seen that. Yeah, I think it's that's really interesting. I don't think we've seen a deck quite like this for a very long time. Just a straight good stuff deck because the synergy based decks were so strong. Like Jade Druid obviously was oppressively strong in Frozen Throne, but before that in Ungoro, we discussed this in our previous episode, like the Pirates deck and the Paladin deck both just had so much. Well, actually, I don't know if it was exactly our previous episode, but definitely one of our earlier ones. Those decks just had so much strength built into their card synergy. So not just the individual cards, but the interaction between the two, like incidental upgrade effects going on to your Fiery War Axe. You take your strong card and you make it even better. Or the Murlocs, just buffing each other. You get your 2 mana 2/3 just because that's the vanilla test, but you also get +1/+1 on another minion, and that's a Totem Golem worth of stats suddenly, and Totem Golem's broken. So
It's a good one.
it's a good one. So yeah, it's interesting that we're coming off of those decks, those high synergy decks, and we see just a straight good stuff deck. And like it's funny because the Rogue deck has the word combo on some of its cards, but very much these cards are just good in isolation.
Yes, SI Agent.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Van Cleef, not so much, though. Does it even say combo? I
Um,
think it's actually just Battle Cry.
I see. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know the templating, but I mean Vile Spine Slayer's combo for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, yeah, that's interesting, and I think the lack of synergy in the deck contributes to the amount of flex slots because a card is good in the context of all the other cards. That's definitely something we've talked about before. And if the metagame is such that a particular card is good, you can put it in the deck, like Bone Mare. Or if the metagame is such that a particular card is not very good, like maybe Spellbreaker, you can just not run the card and you can replace it with another card that happens to be good. So that makes this type of deck adaptable, and
Mhm.
it gives it staying power, I think. It makes it so that it won't just go away suddenly because, a counter appears and, oh, well, this deck can't say anything to that deck. It can just adapt some of its slots and end up trying to beat that deck, or at least shoring up its matchup a little bit.
Yeah, there's no real counter to this deck.
Yeah.
If you look at the VS stats, it hardly has any bad matchups at all.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so I'm wondering, though, if we'll end up seeing this deck at the end of Frozen Throne as well. I mean, I'm sure we will, but I wonder if it's going to be as dominant as it is now, or if people are going to discover something that does well against it.
Well, I think another reason that the meta is the way it is because of how recently things got changed
I agree with that.
due to the nerfs.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Things are still being figured out. I'm sure, like things like Dragon Warrior happened just kind of out of nowhere. I don't
Evolve
think
Shaman did
Dragon
too.
Warrior. Yes. I've been seeing sort of like control versions of Evolve Shaman essentially with Volcano.
Mm.
So that deck is mutating. Other decks are going to do that too. Um, and so some things will evolve that work better against this deck, I think. But it's maybe never going to drop below 50% win rate in spite of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's
And it might
strong.
in fact still stay at like the 52, 53 area for the rest of the until more cards come out.
Yeah, we know that synergistic aggro decks can beat these good stuff decks pretty well, and that's why we didn't see this until Pirate Warrior went away. So if somebody can find such a deck that doesn't just auto lose to the other decks, then that might be what we need to sort of clear this rogue var.
Yeah, maybe Quest Shaman.
Maybe not Quest Shaman, or maybe Quest Shaman.
Maybe Quest Druid.
Oh boy, that's
I actually saw someone streaming Quest Druid before the Innervate nerf, and it was like doing pretty alright.
I bet it was. They had to innervate.
And they also have a really cool card for triggering the quest, which says you need to summon something with 5 or more power. Ultimate Infestation.
Oh man.
When I saw that quest ding go up in addition to all the other stuff on that card. I just like felt so bad for that person. And for a brief moment, I was like, is that quest good? Just because of Ultimate Infestation?
Yeah, I think it's just the combination of the Druid Ramp package and Ultimate Infestation made absurd decks just viable. You could just run as much greedy, expensive stuff as you wanted, including the
That
quest, apparently.
that's exactly what it was. It would complete the quest and then play the 5 mana 8/8 that makes all your minions cost 0.
Mm,
And then with Ultimate Infestation and just play nearly everything that it
yeah,
draws because they all cost 0.
yeah.
Is way better than having Innervate.
So that's actually an example of you. That's almost a degenerate example of a deck with a lot of flex slots, just like double Nourish, double Jade Blossom, double Wild Growth, double Innervate, double Ultimate Infestation. That's your deck's core,
Hmm.
and you can add Jades if you want. You can add the Jade package, or you could add like the Easy Big package, or the Quest package, or you could add this Taunt, Strong Shell, Scavenger package. But no matter what you add, because you have that core package, as long as the stuff you're adding is like strong enough, you can win.
Yeah, and when the Quest Druid deck is like looking pretty good, something's not quite right.
No, definitely not. Yeah,
And
it's the
that
interaction
definitely
point.
died with Innervate.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason that package was so strong we hadn't seen in the past is like, it's not that, again, all cards are good in context of other cards. Innervate got a lot better when Ultimate Infestation came out. So because Innervate like used to just be one of the worst cards you could pick up off the top of your deck, but when you have a card like Ultimate Infestation in your deck, suddenly like you can easily make a 12 mana play, or you can just play Ultimate Infestation, 2 more turns early, and that can make the card a lot better in the late game and just shores up all the card's weaknesses. Now you're just cheating on mana. You're basically playing a Black Lotus that is good at any point of the game, and that's a good card.
Yeah, since it gives you so much stuff, getting it earlier is significant. It's like investing money. Like if you can make your investment earlier, it'll be big faster.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, Jade Druid is another really strong deck right now that has a ton of flex slots.
Yeah, it did before. That was definitely something that I noticed about it before the Innervate nerf. There were a ton of different builds of Jade running around, and like all of them were doing well. And I think that's because the core was just so strong that like you could have put whatever you wanted in the flex slots, like Fireflies or something. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, the
Magma
deck
Rager.
it definitely has a bunch. I mean, say it had at least 5. It definitely had at least 5, and probably got more when Innervate left because you don't need to run that card anymore.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the least flexible cards as we just described.
Yep.
And with that out, it's just something you can use. Doomsayer or Galaka Crawler, Medivh.
Mark of the
Um,
Lotus, Power of the Wild.
yeah, but Bone Mare.
Yep.
My list has a Bone Mare.
Yeah, these
It's
are.
just good in everything.
Yeah, I mean that card's unbelievable. It's just such a stat bomb. Um, yeah, but I do agree with you. I think that a lot of the strongest decks we're seeing right now are just very, very flexible. They have a lot of flex slots in them, and we haven't seen this kind of good stuff deck in a while. Because in a way, Brazakis is it's sort of a good stuff deck. It's like good answers plus a 2 card combo plus a really, really good singleton card. And yeah, well, we'll have to see if there are some synergistic decks that can come and put these in check.
Yeah, so a lot of them just got nerfed. I think that's part of the reason why we're in this flex
Yeah,
state that all these good stuff tech out decks are successful. Murlocs took a hit. Um, Pirates took a hit. These minion type based synergy decks
yeah.
are the ones that got hurt. Um, and I'm sure something exists. It's just a matter of finding it.
Yeah, it's tough to find. So, one deck that we've seen on the rise is it is synergy based, synergy minion based deck is Zoo in Warlock.
Yes,
Yeah, I haven't seen a ton of it on the ladder, but VS reports are putting it as a real deck, which is great because it has not been that for a very long time.
that's exciting.
It is exciting. And it does seem strong. I mean, Kelesith is a strong enough high roll that, it gives sometimes a minion based deck kind of needs a free win, right? And that gives it a free win. And the rest of the deck is already been, it's had strong minions. Flame Imp is a really good card. Voidwalker is a really good card. And you can combine, and like Malkazar's Imp, that's a really good card. Combined with like Doomguard, which is another really good card. That card was fine on its own, without the Imp, and then you add the Imp to it, and suddenly it's like insane.
Yeah, it gets you, assuming you don't already have Blood Reaver Gul'dan in your hand, it gets you to him sooner,
Yep.
and will also make him really insane. I mean, getting Doomguard off that card is dumb.
Yep.
And it also has that sort of finishing power with Bone Mares and Blood Reaver Gul'dan. So it's not just the early game, it's more like a mid-range deck that even if you sort of slow it down, it'll just keep tapping, and it can still beat you. So that's good against a priest that's trying to make them run out of stuff. They're not really going to do that.
Yeah.
And then also the fact that you're drawing pretty much way more than any other aggro deck normally would. Gives you a little bit better odds on getting your Kelesith, but more so when you get Kelesith, it's really good.
Yeah.
Because Kelesith pumps the cards in your deck. So if you have more access to your deck, Kelesith is better. And since you're drawing a lot, you have more of that than most aggro decks. So, you kind of have better odds of getting him early, but you're usually on tapping early.
Mm.
So that's not much of a real argument, but when you get him, he'll be better.
Yeah, definitely. Or if you've already played him, you can capitalize more on what he's given you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in a lot of cases, dropping Gul'dan is just the end of the game.
Yeah, that card is very hard to beat.
Yep. Yeah, even for Priest. I mean, the swing on the board right away is often a little much for them to take care of with one spell. Especially if they've already blown their Dragonfire Potion, because you are at heart, a minion-based aggro deck. But then if they have to take several turns to deal with your board and you have your Zero Power, they're gonna have to like beat your board and then win, and it's just hard to do that.
Yep, they're going to be gaining health plus the 5 armor. It's not an easy time. Despicable Dreadlord is also really good against other aggressive decks or just any minion-based deck.
Totally.
Which is what Tempo Rogue is. And yeah, I think that the Zoo deck was more popular in higher ranks, and then Hunter was more popular in lower ranks. So we'll see how that ultimately plays out. But those decks, I think both. So Hunter, like Aggro Hunter and Zulok, both have a good deal of different lists right now. I think both of those decks aren't really figured out. So those are going to evolve, and one of them might prove to actually be pretty good at beating Rogue, or at least better than it's getting credit for right now.
Yeah.
Most likely Zulok, I would think, because that deck does seem really strong, but there's definitely more Hunters packing Deathstalker Rexar to success right now, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I mean that's a good card when you need to grind out a victory. Or if you're against a deck that keeps dealing with your threats and you're both top decking, that's an awesome card to have on your side. So it makes sense.
So yeah, still definitely this we're in a flex flux. It's sort of things haven't resolved. I don't even think things were resolved when the nerfs hit as part of it. I think we mentioned this, but not today, but in a prior episode, how Hunter hadn't been a deck, and the nerf is probably going to make it a deck. But actually, before the nerf, somebody got rank 1 legendary with Hunter, and there actually was a Hunter deck. So people were that's basically proof that people were still figuring things out. The meta was still changing around. Fewer people were playing Jade Druid, sort of just because they were sick of it.
Yeah, right.
Because it didn't seem to lose any win rate, but it did go down in popularity. Sort of leading up to the nerf, even before the nerf hit.
Yeah.
Shot a lot more down after the nerf.
Of course.
But that sort of proves that we were in a flux state. We were not, in a resolved state before the nerf, and the nerf shook it up even more and mixed it mixed the jelly beans. So now, if we were trying to sort them out into colors, we're not close.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I also think that a lot of the reason that we're seeing a deck like Tempo Rogue and sort of some of these high flex slot decks come around is because yeah, the jelly beans are still unsorted, like we're in a relatively there's a lot of entropy. Things have to cool down,
Mm,
there's a lot of
yeah,
heat. There's a lot of heat in this system, and the heat has to leave the system. So
yeah, we're all like liquidy.
yep.
We'll be more solid when we cool down.
Exactly. Things are still cooling down, so we're seeing a lot more noise in the system. So some of the decks that we're seeing are probably going to stick around. I mean, the Razakas has been around for a while and now is just in a really good spot. And people have also been working on that list for a very long time. So
Hmm.
I think that that deck is sort of nearing its final states, and people will identify the flex slots and start to tech them as the other decks change. But we still are seeing decks like Zoo come on the horizon. Decks like Hunter are leaving the metagame, or they're at least doing worse. So it's interesting. And yeah, things take time to adapt to different ranks. So that's something VS pointed out in either the most recent report or their previous report. They mentioned that people take a longer time to catch on at lower ranks than the higher ranks. So the higher ranks are sort of on the bleeding edge, as you might expect, and that trickles down into the lower ranks with time. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, there's still a little bit left to do. But in the meantime, it's helpful to think about how you can tech some of the existing decks.
Yeah, I mean, I think this state is really fun
Yeah,
of Flex Flux, where lots of decks can be built lots of different ways. I've been having a pretty good time trying very different things for like Corpse Taker and Rogue, because usually that's not the case.
right.
Usually, if you're gonna play pirates, there's one that you can put in a Captain Greenskin or an Naga Corsair, and that's pretty like one of the only decisions you would get to make with the older lists. So having these decks that you can be like, well, you can play elementals, you can play more pirates,
Right.
play another prince, more like shadow step style things. I even had like Lotus Assassin, like that. Is that being a card is pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
Um, so we could probably start with Verzakis. It's just like the the it's got them like maybe the most flex slots. It's definitely skill. The skill with the deck is largely in how you fill these slots.
Yeah,
So it's maybe one of the most important ones to talk about.
I think so too. I mean, it's tough though. It's for me at least. It's hard to look at a Razakis priest list and digest it, because there's 30 different cards in it. So that can make it a little bit tough to figure out what is a flex slot and what you can take out.
Hmm.
One thing I see rotated in and out of the deck, and I think a lot of the decks have some mixture of two different packages now. Is like there's this cantrip package that's like Novice Engineer, Gnomish Inventor, and I've seen some lists with Cold Light Oracle. I don't see that anymore though. Um, and they'll take cards like that help you draw other cards, Blood Mage Falnos. And when you expect to be facing a lot of other control decks, drawing your combo faster is better. You're going to just win more games if you can start machine gunning them before they quest mage you or before they start machine gunning you. On the other hand, cards like Gnomish Inventor are horrendous when your opponent is beating you down with five power like dudes, um,
Indeed,
or
it's not
untargetable dudes.
not gonna do anything. Like Gnomish Inventor does not stack up well against Bear Shark.
Right. Yeah, that's a horrendous matchup. You just lose your guy and you paid one more mana, or they just ignore it and smash you. So there's usually some mixture of cards like Tar Creeper, anti-aggro type cards, or just Radiant Elementals, early game minions that can come down and tango a little bit on board. And these cantrip spells, you maybe take the best of the cantrips and the best of the tango minions, and you jam them into your deck. Um,
Hmm.
the fastest, the sort of like lowest to the ground Razakis decks that face the most anti-aggro decks have run like Tortolon Shellraiser, Elise Trailblazer, and of course Tar Creeper, Radiant Elemental, and maybe like one or two other one drops and two drops.
Galactic
Uh,
Crawler. Even
oh
if
yeah,
you're not facing a pirate deck, it's still nice to have 2 mana 2/3
yeah,
against another aggressive deck.
yep. I mean, against pretty much every single minion-based deck that has targets.
It's true.
So it,
Patches is just the man.
yeah, that card's really strong. um, that's a card we've seen a lot of since it came out in a lot of places where it shouldn't necessarily be.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, Zulok is running Southsea Captain. That doesn't seem right.
yeah,
But
yeah, it
a
seems
3 mana
weird.
5/5 is really good.
It's true. It's true. So, um, yeah, that's one way you can do this deck, and I think there's
Hmm.
other things you can do as well. I think most lists are probably running Prophet Velen at this point. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that has proven to be, even if you don't have the combo going, it's like I'm gonna gain some extra health or deal extra damage and get a 7/7. And that's usually good enough.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely helps you out with OTK, or it helps you stabilize. I actually managed to OTK somebody from 30 with Velen yesterday. It felt really good.
Nice. That's always a good feeling.
Yeah.
My Valen story is that I was down to like 6 against like some hunter, and then I did Valen Spirit Lash back to 30
Oh, that's great.
because it doubles the damage and then it doubles the healing.
Oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah, it doesn't take many minions to make it take you all the way back to full health.
Sure. Yeah, that must have made them want to not play Hearthstone anymore.
I hope it made them feel really bad in real life.
I think it did. Um, yeah. So what else is in this deck? How else do you flex this deck?
Well, another sort of package to apply is Gadget Sand Auctioneer,
Huh.
and leaning more on cheaper spells. So
Sure.
rather than using Greater Healing Potion, which really that's a flexible card, you don't have to use that. Use
Like Binding
Binding
Heal.
Heal.
Yeah.
Yep. So you put Circle of Healing in. Most lists already use Silence, but you definitely use that. Um, and you can also then use Ostracized Soul Priest.
Mm.
She can make her way back into the deck. And then you're sort of uh, got an even better game when you're playing against control because you already won just stuff to just sit in your hand. Um, but now you have another way to get really rewarded for that. Like you're basically waiting to get Lyra or Raza and Anduin
Yeah.
normally, and this gives you a third thing to wait for, or fourth thing,
Right.
in Gadget Set Auctioneer.
That's
Um,
interesting. I'll have to try that. That sounds fun.
it is definitely fun. It's sort of like the balls deep version of using Acolyte and Wild Pyromancer, which is
Sure.
another
Sure.
thing. You could even do that in the same deck. Pyromancer's been pretty strong. It's good against Zoo. It's pretty good against the road decks. And then it lets you use your Acolyte of Pain more effectively, though you don't have to use Acolyte of Pain. But Acolyte's definitely good right now because of all the minion decks.
Right.
They're likely to have a 1 health minion that when you play Acolyte, it screws up their plan enough to be worth 3 mana.
That's interesting. I guess if you're also running a bunch of cheap spells to make something like Auctioneer work, it does make Lyra stronger, and it also makes Anduin stronger later.
Yeah, because that's sort of one of the things people noticed that got them to put No Mission Venture in is that it doesn't matter how terrible your cards are. If you
Right.
have Raz and Anduin, you're just going to win as long as you have cards. They could be
That's true.
like complete garbage, uh, but they're good enough as long as they're a card.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, something like No Ocean Venture or the Shrinking Potion, which doesn't really do anything potentially.
Mm.
Um, Now you can also use it with Auctioneer to just draw another card, get you closer to your combo.
No,
Um,
that's fascinating. I definitely want to give that a shot. That sounds really cool.
um, it's a trip. And then also Radiant Elemental can make it a lot more degenerate depending on how you draw your deck. But Radiant Elemental and the Auctioneer is definitely pretty sweet too.
Yeah.
Um,
I've seen a bunch of lists running Dirty Rat just as a singleton. I mean, it's not a package, but it is a card that's potentially good against stuff like Evolve Shaman or maybe other Anduin decks.
yep, you can get those control decks, get Roz out of their hand. It's pretty devastating. Or Even getting Novice Engineer out of their hand can be annoying. Prevent them from drawing a card. Curious
Yeah,
Glimmer
yeah.
Root.
Even if you whiff, they're not running Ragnaros, right? So you
Yeah.
can if you whiff, you're getting like Radiant Elemental or Acolyte of Pain or like a Cabal Talon Priest or something. You're not getting anything too scary.
Or you're going to lose to Prophet Valen.
Yeah, or you just like take Prophet Valen out of their hand and that's it. So I guess that's their Ragnaros, but that's
There
not
is one.
Ragnaros. Yeah, that's okay though. I'll take one.
And usually, you can have removal or something like that. But Dirty Rat's definitely good. I think it's also pretty good against the Rogue deck because they'll have like random
Um,
Fireflies and SI agents that are not
Bile
big,
Spines, Bone
taking up
Mares.
most of their hand. Yeah, getting a Bone Mare is like a mixed bag because you just gave them a 5/5, but you're not going to have to ride the lightning later, so
Right.
that's good. Um, and then like Doomsayer was something that was really common that I think people are starting to use less because there's not turn one Vicious Fledgling anymore.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot more demand for Doomsayer when decks like Pirates and Token Druid were really prominent. Now the decks kind of slowed down to being more about turn three, turn four, turn five. Doomsayer's not as worth it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So that's been my experience with the card playing with it a little bit is that oftentimes like in in the metagame where you're fighting the synergistic aggro decks, having a turn two Doomsayer felt amazing because even if they just played a one drop on turn one, like they just played Vialton Inquisitor, and you play Doomsayer, you feel like you really got them.
Oh man, if you get a Violent Inquisitor with Doomsayer, you're like jumping for joy.
Yeah, because like not only did you kill that 1/3, but you stopped them from developing on turn two, and that could have been the Rockpool Hunter turn. And like if that was the Rockpool Hunter turn, you're in some deep trouble.
It's a
Um,
really big swing potentially.
yeah, but like getting Swashbuckler and Patches with your Doomsayer doesn't feel nearly as good.
It's still good.
It's still fine. Yeah, it's still fine. But I mean, if their next turn was to just like weapon up or Kelesith, like you didn't really stop them from doing anything. You just kind of took out you know, two power and two toughness with your Doomsayer, and you're usually hoping for about that much plus a big tempo advantage, which you just don't get. I
Yeah,
think,
you're not like even necessarily, or you're not packing as many minions to play into in this list. A lot of them don't have Cabal Talon Priest, for example.
yeah, yeah, that's another sort of weakness of Doomsayer is it's really good when you can you use it to get a tempo edge, like they're leading, and then you play Doomsayer, you stop them from doing anything for a turn, which takes them off a play, basically burns mana crystals, and then you can follow it up by putting a guy out on the board. You got a ton of value. You got basically max value if you kill something, stop them from playing something, and get a guy out before they play anything.
There
That
should
could win the game.
definitely. Oh wait, you finish because my
No,
dude's stupid.
I was I was just gonna say that can win the game. I mean, getting that kind of tempo advantage on a tempo based deck uh, can just buy you enough time to close it out later.
Yeah,
But
that's
go on.
really all you want with the Razaka stack is just buy time until you get the two cards that make you win when you have them together.
Yep.
It's like it's like Go Fish. Like you're just hoping to get the two of a kind. Um, I was gonna say that there should be some Hearthstone player named Max Value. Like I'm Max Value.
That would be a sweet name. If we ever decide to do some kind of wacky alternative account, that sounds like the name.
If they ever make a Hearthstone MMO, we'll make our character named Max Value.
Max value. That's actually in Final Fantasy 14 where you have a first and last name. That'd be a good one. Keep that one in mind. If I ever make an
except
alt.
except you'd have to play Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, well, there's worse things. You could be playing Final Fantasy 11
Yeah, that's true. Or 13.
or 13. Um,
Try going left. I can't. Try going right. I can't do that either.
it's like those.
Is this whole game a hallway?
It's like if you remember the physics labs where you have like the frictionless rail, and it's like it's just forward or backwards. That's the whole game.
Binary situation.
Yeah, I hear it opens up eventually, but I couldn't make it that far.
Way too deep.
Anyway, so there's a lot you could do with that list, and I think we talked a bunch about the rogue list already, but I think it's worth going over in a more focused way.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it would be what part of this is what are you playing against? So you have to see what's popular at your rank, and also you should if you're playing, you'll have a gist of what you're playing against. Um, so I think things like gadgets and auctioneer, just to sum up the priest stuff, like something like auctioneer is going to be better if you're seeing more control and more slow decks,
Mm,
and then more like Galactic crawlers and Tar Creeper, Cabal Talon Priest, early minions if you're seeing more aggro. And then obviously Galactic Crawler is better if there's more pirates. Um, and if there were really a lot of Murlocs, you could use Hungry Crab. Get
yeah,
creative.
totally.
And also Circle of Healing is going to be better when you have cards like Tar Creeper and Cabal Talon Priest in your deck because you're more likely to have the heal effect matter. Um, but and a Dirty Rat, if you expect a lot of Bitter Tide Hydras, don't play Dirty Rat. But if you do expect a lot of Control decks or Quest Mage, something like that you want to beat, Dirty Rat would be great there.
Yeah, Dirty Rat's
Um,
really good against Quest Mage. That's one that I forgot to mention.
and I mean that deck's pretty unpopular, but
It's
it,
true.
it can happen. Um, and then so sort of some of that is redundant with Rogue. You can play a Kelisethless list. Kelisethless list. Whoa, uh, that's a mouthful. Um, and you would want to do that if you are seeing a lot of pirates because that list gets to use Galactic Crawler.
Hmm.
Um, and then if you don't really feel like what you're losing to or what you're seeing frequently is pirates, the Blaze Caller list I think is good against other mid-range decks
Yeah.
because they're trying to have a better one-for-one tempo board state, and Blaze Caller is a huge swing in regard to those parameters.
Yeah, so that's something interesting. In the previous metagames, a lot of the tempo swingy type cards we saw were happening on turns like 2 and 3, like Fire War Axe or Rallying Blade.
Hmm.
But a card like Vilespine Slayer or Blaze Caller can do a tempo swing on turn like 7, and
Yeah,
that's
it's
a
a
lot
pretty
harder.
pretty rare Vilespine to be before turn 5.
Yeah. So that's really good though. I mean, most like a Rallying Blade is often not enough at that point because they either have like something behind a taunt or they just have like a big boy. But
Hmm.
if you play Vilespine, you can totally take care of either of those things. Whatever's behind the taunt or the big boy.
Yeah, I mean Bone Mare makes anything into a big boy. That's
Yep.
definitely a lot of the meta is being caused by Bone Mare specifically.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it's the new Doctor Boom.
it's in a lot of decks. So um, if you're seeing a lot of aggro, you can definitely use 2 copies of Tar Creeper. That's something I think is a good call. Um, and there's also if you're seeing a lot of minion decks and aggro decks, you can use Lotus Assassin. Um, that card is also really great because it ensures that you get your Bone Mare off. You can kill
Mm,
something with a turn 6, it'll re-stealth, and then turn 7 you can Bone Mare it. Um, but it's probably less relevant against a control deck.
right.
Against control, you can use Bitter Tide.
Yeah, that's true. Priest has a tough time dealing with that. They basically have to death it, and if you get them to blow their Shadow Word Death, their only copy of Shadow Word Death on turn 5, or their Shadow Visions into Shadow Word Death, and you're pretty happy about that
Yeah, that I
because
mean you got to
you
get through it eventually.
yeah, and I mean, okay, you lost an 8/8, but if they blew it on 5, you have like a hand probably full of cards that are going to be terrifying, or a deck full of cards that are going to be terrifying.
Yeah, it's unlikely that they'll be able to like efficiently get rid of Bittertide and other minions. That's
Yes.
but that's what's so great about it. It's also really scary to a Jade Druid. So if you start
Oh
seeing more
yeah.
Jade Druid, which is definitely a deck, I was climbing with it before, but I definitely climb less when my opponent has a Bittertide Hydra.
Yep.
Um, so that's a reason to use that card. But I think if you're seeing a lot of other aggressive decks, then Bittertide can be risky. You could use Cobalt Scalebane instead
Yeah.
as a 5 drop. Um, if things are really killing you too fast, like you're seeing Hunter frequently, Prince Valinar would help a lot with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
really like that in the mirror against aggro decks. I just don't have any fours in my deck, so it's a good four, and I run it, and I have it. I would never craft it though. Um,
yeah, that Zaryl is also. Um, I think Zaryl is good, but I don't really know um, what kind of list wants it.
yeah, it's it's a tricky one to evaluate. I mean, it does a bunch of good stuff for you. It gives you like your mana's worth for sure. It's definitely a value card and not a tempo card, obviously, because it's a 4 mana 3/2. But the cards you get are useful because they're good on their own. Like, there's a Shadow Step, there's something that draws a card, there's like a 2 damage. Those are all fine cards. Um, and it can also retrigger combos.
Yeah, I don't own one, so I'm not entirely certain on that one, but um, the, I think if you're trying to be more like cute with good battle cries and using finishing people off with Leroy Jenkins, um, you have the two cold bloods that would probably
Yeah.
make Zaryl better. But you can also play. I think if you wanted to play more, I'm gonna one for one you better, or I'm gonna two for one you a lot, and I'm gonna have tempo swings with my elementals. You might only need one cold blood.
Hmm.
You can also use the Phoenix in that deck, the 4 mana 3/3.
Oh, just so you add two more SI agents and you add two more Vile Spine Slayers.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds great. Sign me up.
Yeah, that is an extremely redundant but effective way to play the decks as well. Um,
Yeah, pretty much every time I saw that Phoenix, I got really salty because like it's a good elemental, it's like a fine card, but it's if it didn't have that elemental text, you just never put that in your deck. And
yeah,
it's just so medium. And every time I got like, swung by it, I knew it was good. I knew it did what it was supposed to do, but I was still just like, is this arena? Am I really about to lose to this garbage?
yeah, it really is just garbage. If you're playing against like a control deck, you're like, wow, this is just like a really like I wish I had
This is
Chillwind Yeti. Like,
right.
can I
The
get a
Chillwind
Chillwind
Yeti
Yeti?
is so much better.
Um, but against another aggro deck, getting an extra 2 damage on one of their minions can be what it took to have a huge swing.
Yep, no, I agree with you. It's totally worth the stats that you're paying to play the card.
Yeah,
I think that Naga Corsair is another card that does something pretty
mm,
similar, although it has more setup cost.
yeah, but that's definitely just really solid. Um, I think one of the things to think about with that is how often are you seeing the Locket Crawler?
Yeah, yeah, that's one reason why I'm really hesitant to put it in the deck. Is Crawler's already really strong against Rogue, and adding that to your deck just makes it even better. Um, but I mean, I'm sure it's good. It definitely allows you to do some really degenerate fast things.
Yeah, having a meaningful 4 drop is definitely very nice if you're trying to just out tempo them, and that will let you kill an extra minion potentially.
Yeah, I wonder if Chillin Yeti is good.
Um, I definitely like a month ago I saw some tournament list that was like playing Token Druid and it had Chillin Yeti. It's like nice.
Yeah, that feels good. That's
uh,
nice. That's a classic.
I feel like most of the 4 drops, if not all of them that we mentioned, are better.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're really greedy, you can do the Corpse Taker list. It wasn't. I didn't. After a while, it stopped working. I think it might have only been working because I was at a lower rank.
Sure.
Um, but it's at least fun, and you can, if you don't like Argent Squire, you can use Argent Commander instead.
Ooh, that's fun.
He's very good when you kill it, set the Shadow Step.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess that makes your Shadow Steps better. It also makes your Cold Bloods better. It's basically just another Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, but it can also be like a value Leroy more frequently. I don't know if that's good enough. Um, it's sort of
No,
like
it's interesting.
it's sort of like doing what the elemental package does, but not committing to elementals. Though really, this deck does not need to commit much because it always has the 2 Fireflies and then at least one Tar Creeper.
Yeah, and Blaze Caller is enough of a payoff to like double up on the Tark Reapers and maybe run two Phoenixes. Because Phoenix is fine. Again, I think it depends on what you're facing.
Yeah, but since Firefly lets you get a minion and another one can be sitting in your hand,
Yeah,
that makes it triggering the elemental cards in this deck surprisingly easy. I did
Yep.
play the elementalist for a bit, and I never had any trouble with that.
Yeah, that's I wouldn't. I'm not surprised. I mean, you often want to sit on the token anyway. You don't really want to play it out unless you're playing against like aggro druid or something.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
it's often just like gonna set up a Vile Spine or some other critical combo piece later, so you're already kind of playing it the way you would have to play it for the elemental deck. That's why I basically didn't notice that
Yeah.
the elementals had that requirement, or that Stone Tolvir Stone Shaper had that requirement, because I was already playing an elemental every turn.
Hmm. No, that's very interesting. Um, so, are there any other decks we should talk about in terms of flex slots?
Yeah, well, there is Jade Druid, but
That's true.
it's mostly the same as Razakis in that, there's more aggressive decks. You want Doomsayer or Tar Creeper. I think Tar Creeper is a very good tech card for Jade Druid. Um, if it's specifically Pirates, Galactic Crawler can definitely go in that deck.
Oh yeah.
Um, what would compel you to use Mark of the Lotus?
So the card already had a reasonable amount of synergy with the deck because you are going pretty wide. You do have cards like your Malfurion that put a bunch of bodies on the board.
Hmm.
You have Spreading Plague in the deck. So I think you'd run Mark of the Lotus if you were facing a lot of decks that were weak to Spreading Plague. Um,
Hmm.
just because it can take your plague, which is just going to buy you some turns, and actually turn it into something that's close to unbeatable. Just one Mark of the Lotus on a Spreading Plague with three dudes is like massive.
Yeah, you're getting. I mean, making those taunts have an extra power is just really big.
It's huge. Yeah, because they have to eat it. They have to throw stuff at it. When it has one power, that's basically nothing. But two is like you doubled the amount of power on the card, and that's a really really big change. It's I mean that's the biggest fractional marginal change you'll get for increasing the power. It's going from 1 to 2, or I guess going to 0 to 1. Um,
Hmm.
but 1 to 2 is really big. So that's one reason to do it. I mean, you can also run Power of the Wild, which synergizes with Fandral.
Hmm.
Having Mark of the Lotus is great for a post Ultimate Infestation state because at that point you might end up playing like two guys. You might play like a Jade Spirit and another 4 drop, and then you can like Mark of the Lotus.
Yeah, having
Um,
another cheap spell is nice for that reason to actually get stuff out of your hand.
yeah,
Um, and if they have Skulking Geist, they have Skulking Geist. Like you're gonna be salty no matter what, whether or not you have Mark of the Lotus in your hand.
yeah. But
Um,
most people aren't running Skulking Geist. I think at least like maybe at the highest of High Legend, people are running it to beat specific people. But
yeah,
I have not seen a lot of it.
it has definitely decreased in popularity, though. That's another tech card for Priest that
Yeah.
I guess we forgot to mention.
Yep.
Um, and if you're seeing a lot of Skulking Geist, you would not want to do the Gadgets and Auctioneer version of Priest, because
No, no,
then
no.
that you actually get very weak to Skulking Geist when you add that many more one-drop spells to your deck,
Yep.
and are that much more compelled to hang on to them. Um, Spellbreaker can also go in Jade Druid, just like it can go in Rogue. Mind Control Tech actually is great.
Yeah. Yep. That's a very good card.
That's so if you're not losing to control decks like Razakis Priest, but you're losing to decks that are going wide, Shaman, for example, or other Jade Druids, Mind Control Tech is really great because the main way you lose is by losing control of the board. They
Yeah.
get too many big guys out too fast in one turn that can just sort of spell the end for you, and Mind Control Tech can completely turn that around. Sort of the worse the situation is, the better the card works. Um, and
Yeah. Definitely.
theoretically, if you can just hang in there a little bit longer, your golems will get big enough to win you the game. If only you can stick in there a little longer. Um, Bone Mare is unreal. If
Yeah. I
you
can see that.
that I think is good if you want to have more longevity. You're not losing games early on. You're losing games that go for a while. Um, because it also is going to surprise the crap out of people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And
Yeah,
there's
there's some
value to
value in that
that.
though.
That's something to always think about too, and to consider being a little creative with your teching.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something we should go into more detail about in the future. Is
Hmm.
one of the biggest advantages you can get from teching your deck or brewing a novel deck is that people will like mulligan wrong or play wrong against you. They
Yeah,
just they'll play into your threats or they won't play around them. But yeah, something like Bone Mare out of a Jade Druid is just going to be shocking, but it's a good card no matter where you play it.
yep. And this deck makes minions, so it can work.
Yep,
Um,
totally.
and then sort of along the same line, if you're losing longer games rather than getting beaten early, I think if you're getting beaten early, Tar Creeper is one of the first things to look at. Doomsayer, Galactic Crawler.
Yeah,
But longer situations, Medivh is extremely powerful because it makes your ultimate infestations even more unfair.
yep.
And if you're expecting this long game, it's not so much, oh, I gotta stay in there long enough to get to my ultimate infestation. It's gonna happen. It's just a matter of getting enough value out of it to win and not die to Raza combo or something like that.
It also
Um,
gives you a little bit of insurance on Spreading Plague.
yep.
So that's a card that can feel really clunky in some matchups. But even if you play Plague and you get a random 6/6 and 1/1/5 taunt, like that's pretty good.
Yeah, he makes the one of the cards that's often really bad in a control matchup suddenly pretty powerful.
Yeah. But did I say random 6/6? I meant random 6 mana minion.
Yeah, I mean it could be a six
But
six.
potentially. But yeah, that's there's a bunch of ways to flex this deck. It's kind of the same as it was, before the patch. Just a deck with a lot of good flex options, and that's really good.
Yep, but anything that doesn't say Jade on it or ramp for the most part is something you can take out and fool around
Yep,
with. I guess maybe not swipe and wrath, but um, it's all going to depend on what you expect to play against. So this advice means something different if you're doing a tournament and what level the tournament is, like what level of players you expect to play against, and it also affects you'll need to take into account what rank you are.
yes, yeah,
And you can look on Vicious Syndicate and I'm sure other places to see what kind of decks are being played at that rank. You can
yep,
also definitely get a gist if you play at least 30 games. You should have some idea of what is popular at your rank. Um,
definitely.
and then that, but without that information, you can't properly fill these slots. So going with a stock list for something like Rizaka's Priest to start with is definitely fine, but that is definitely a deck that you're going to want to personalize for your situation because there is no perfect list, for Rizaka's.
Yeah,
I usually, or when I first found out that you could net deck long, long ago, a magical day. These lists sort of seemed like just perfect recipes. Then
right.
if you I thought of it like cooking. If you veer off from the recipe, that's how you screw up your cake. That's how your food comes out bad. Is if you don't follow the recipe. So I would make sure I get everything exactly the same. And usually with the main deck that was right, but in Magic the Gathering, you sort of get to have separate cards just as your tech cards, the sideboard. And I would also copy those exactly, and that was very often not helpful at all because
No,
those
definitely not.
those were entirely for specific, like, tournament on a specific day. And so when I copied it exactly, I wound up with a lot of things that didn't help. Um, and so you'll sort of need to do that with a deck like Rizaka's Priest, Tempo Rogue, Jade Druid. They all have enough slots that you'll want to optimize them for you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's a great place to maybe a great place to leave it is that like when you do a net deck, when you copy, a list off of like HS replay, or well, actually less HS replay, but like VS or maybe the top deck websites, the sort of tournament deck aggregator websites.
Hmm.
Especially if these lists come from high legend or a tournament, these are teched for a very different environment than what you're playing in. So,
Hmm.
you know, when people are vying for the top maybe 10 slots in Hearthstone, they might expect to queue up against the same streamer a bunch of times. And they know that that streamer is playing this tech version of this deck and this tech version of that deck. And so they can actually dedicate specific cards in their deck to deal with that. And same thing in a tournament. If you know that your lineup is packing, you're doing Conquest and you're packing 5 decks, you know that, like, okay, when I face off against this deck, it can beat whatever I have out, and then I'm going to play this deck into it later to try to beat it. So that means that, like, you're playing, maybe you anti-aggro out your Jade Druid, and then you can tech your Priest differently to be more anti-control because you have an anti-aggro deck already.
Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously, you can't go sort of balls to the wall anti-aggro, balls to the wall anti-control with either deck, but that's not really what we're talking about. The point is, when you're net decking, these lists are tuned for a different environment, so you really have to be aware of how to use your flex slots. I think that bringing the sideboard example for Magic is a really good one too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's in reality, and whenever you see one of those lists online from a tournament, it was for that tournament specifically.
Yes, or for a legend on that day.
Yeah, and that person definitely did some changes specifically for their situation, which is why pretty much no matter what, at least a little bit of changing will be good. Though, granted, if you never played the deck before, you might not know how to do it, so you'll need to figure that out.
Yeah, and some decks actually just don't have flex slots, like Evolve Shaman. That deck is like none.
Yeah, that's also true. That's sort of a streamlined. You got to do it this way, or you're gonna get a bad cake.
Yeah, yeah. The Saronite Chain Gang is like the flex slot in that deck. That's like it, singular.
Yep. Make it like a Spellbreaker or something.
Or a Glocka Crawler. I think that's where mine is at right now.
Sounds right.
Do you think that's a good place to wrap up?
I think that we wrapped it up nice and tight.
That's how you're supposed to do it. Yeah, I mean, flex slots are important. Use them wisely. If you want to get more information on how to use them wisely, you can check us out on Twitter at twitter.com/lastturnhs, at Facebook, facebook.com/lastturnhs. As always, you can find our stuff on iTunes or Google Play, places like Stitcher. We're on SoundCloud still. That's actually where we do our primary hosting. That's soundcloud.com/lastturn. Yeah, check us out. Check us out on YouTube. Evan, you've been uploading a bunch of videos for our podcast, which is really good.
Oh, it's beyond good. It's like double good.
It's triple good even.
Wow.
it's a lot of good.
Gotta stop
yeah,
there.
Please. Yeah, we're not going to quad good. Please follow us on Twitter, and if you have something to suggest, if you like something we said, you disagreed with us, or you have a topic suggestion, you can hit us up there. You could basically hit us up on any of these services, and we will see it eventually and respond to you. So please do that.
Yeah.
We want to engage with you guys. We want to give you the content that you want.
Tweet us, book our face, whatever. Email us. Let us know what you think about the flux and changing your decks and what you like to do. How do you like to tech out your deck?
Yeah, tweet us lists. That'll be fun.
It's so fun. Fun.
And with that, we will see you guys next turn.
See you next turn.